The cedar plank snapped in two like a brittle bone. Elias Blackstone cursed under his breath, letting the broken wood fall at his feet. His hands, rough, calloused, and bleeding in 3 places, trembled slightly as he leaned forward, planting the hammer handle into the cold, damp earth for balance. The sky above Birch Hollow was gunmetal gray, the kind of sky that promised nothing but more silence. He stared at the gap in the fence. It wasn't just a break in the wood. It was a wound. Something left untended for too long, just like everything else in his life. The fence had once stood tall and proud, a sturdy border between Elias's homestead and the house next door. But time had worn it down, like grief, like guilt. The last storm tore through with wind that sounded too much like his late wife's coughing fits during that final winter. And now the fence, just like him, was split wide open. He drove a nail in with a little too much force, the head bent sideways, slicing the top of his knuckle open. Damn it! Blood trickled, mingling with mud on his skin. He wiped it on his flannel sleeve and kept going. Behind him, small feet padded across the porch. "Daddy, you're bleeding again." Willow Blackstone stood with a worn rag in her hand, hair wild in the wind, and freckles blooming across her cheeks. She was 9 and had already lived through more sorrow than most grown men could carry. "It's nothing, darlin'," Elias muttered, reaching out for the cloth. "Just another stubborn nail. You should let Mr. Tomas help. He knows how to hammer straight." Elias gave her a crooked smile. That man couldn't hit a nail without telling it a story first. Willow giggled. "That's 'cause he's old. And I'm not. You're mountain old, not people old." Elias chuckled softly. "That's worse." As he lined up the next board, Willow wandered toward the far end of the yard, the part where their property met the neighbors. The house next door had been empty for years. Until last week. "You think she's still hiding in there?" Willow asked, peering over the fence. He didn't answer. He didn't like speculation. The new neighbor hadn't introduced herself, and Elias hadn't gone knocking. That was the arrangement he preferred with most folks, mutual silence. But Willow wasn't most folks. "She's got funny boots," Willow continued. "Pink laces." "Boots are boots," Elias said. "She waved at me yesterday. She could be waving at a squirrel. We've got friendly squirrels." "She smiled too," Willow added. "But like, nervous smiling. Like when I forgot my poem at the school play." Elias looked up. The house across the way had soft yellow curtains and flower boxes with nothing planted yet. A porch swing hung still in the chilly air. Just then the front door creaked open, and out she came. She was round like a moon in wool and wore an oversized cardigan that wrapped her like armor. Her hair was an explosion of chestnut curls, barely contained by a clip. She walked carefully, carrying a small wooden tray with 3 glass jars filled with golden jam that caught the sunlight like liquid fire. Willow froze. Elias stood up, straightening his spine without realizing it. "Hi there," the woman called, lifting the tray a bit higher. Elias nodded once. "Afternoon. I saw you working on the fence. Thought you might want something sweet afterward." He said nothing. "It's wild peach preserves," she added, stepping to the fence but not crossing it. "I make them myself." Willow took a step closer, wide-eyed. "Are they from our peaches? They grow wild in the gully." "Just past the creek," she replied. "Best if you pick 'em before the bears do." Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's some bold harvesting. Better than bold bears?" Willow burst out laughing. "I brought 3, the woman said, holding the tray out. "Just in case one gets eaten before dinner." Elias stared at her long enough for most people to back away. But she stood her ground. Name's Juniper, she said. But I go by June. Willow beamed. That's a flower and a month, June smiled, her cheeks flushing. You must be Willow. Willow nodded. And this is my dad. He's grumpy but nice. Thanks, Elias muttered. You're welcome, Willow replied, proud. June placed the jars gently on the fence post, one by one. No pressure. Just thought I'd say hello properly. You from around here? Elias asked. June hesitated. Sort of. I spent summers nearby when I was a girl. This place felt like it was waiting. Waiting for what? Quiet. Peace. Maybe a second try. Elias didn't respond. He didn't believe in second tries. She started backing away, then paused. That fence has stories in it. You can tell. He looked down at the weather-warped wood. Most things here do. June nodded once, then turned and walked back to her porch. The screen door slapped shut behind her. Willow waited until she was gone to whisper, Do you think she's lonely? Elias kept his eyes on the fence. Aren't we all? That night after supper, he stepped onto the back porch with a spoon and a jar. He tasted the peach preserves. It was stupid how good it was. Warm, tart, and sweet all at once, like someone had captured summer and buried it in glass. Willow was already asleep, arms wrapped around her stuffed rabbit. Elias leaned on the porch railing, staring at the tree line. Across the way, the light in June's house was on. Shadow moved behind the curtain. He watched a moment too long, then turned away. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon wood smoke and paper. The scent of something burned clung to the corner's remnants of a rushed attempt at baking earlier that morning, or maybe just the smell of too many memories scorched around the edges. Juniper Holloway sat at the old oak table in her tiny rented kitchen, elbows pressed to the grainy wood, her glasses sliding down the bridge of her nose. She wore a soft flannel nightshirt and wool socks, her curls pulled back messily. The folder in front of her sat open but untouched. The document inside was thin, just 12 pages. That was all it took to change the shape of a town. At the top, Birch Hollow Phase 2 Redevelopment and Acquisition Strategy. She pushed it away with the back of her hand like it was something rotting. Her jaw clenched. I came here to disappear. Not to be seen, she muttered aloud to no one but the quiet crackle of the wall heater. But it was too late for disappearing. Elias Blackstone had seen her. Not through her like most men. Not past her like the ones who thought her body meant she was invisible. He'd looked at her like she mattered, even if it was only long enough to scowl. And the little girl Willow. Sweet, earnest, unknowingly disarming. She had a way of looking right into your chest, like she was searching for the softest part to set up camp. June sighed and leaned back, letting her head fall against the old wooden chair. The porch light from Elias's cabin still shone faintly across the yard, cutting through the early evening mist like a whisper. She'd seen him taste the peach preserves. That moment, just a spoonful and a pause, was enough to make her heart hiccup. She hadn't planned any of this, least of all feeling things. Her phone buzzed sharply on the counter. She considered ignoring it, but she didn't. Hello, she answered, voice low. June, it's Marcus. Her assistant's voice was brisk and clipped city fast. You didn't call in after site review. Are we moving forward on Birch Hollow or not? She pinched the bridge of her nose. Not yet. A pause. Then, too carefully, the board expects updates. We've already secured 3 of the 5 key parcels. The workshop, the cafe, and the blacksmith's lot are still pending. I know what we've secured, she snapped. I signed the damn paperwork. Marcus didn't flinch. Then what's the holdup? She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes drifted to the far end of the yard where the cedar fence stood. The jars were still on the post. Elias hadn't brought in the others yet. One was missing. Probably the one Willow took. June Marcus pressed. "I'm not ready," she said simply. "Since when do you hesitate? You signed on to oversee the expansion for a reason. These are just old buildings. You said it yourself, this place is a ghost town." Ghost town. She'd used those words before. Cold, detached, easy to say from behind a glass desk in a high-rise downtown. Harder to say now, when every morning she woke up to the sound of birds and wind through pine. When a little girl left drawings in her mailbox. When a man with rough hands and wary eyes took the time to rebuild something broken. "I need more time," she said. Marcus sighed. "You've got until Friday. After that legal takes over. This is business, June. You knew the cost when you came here." She hung up before she could say something she'd regret. She looked down at the contract again, then got up and shoved it into the drawer beneath the sink. Let them wait. That night she sat on her porch in the dark, wrapped in a quilt older than she was, watching the trees sway under moonlight. She sipped tea. She listened to the silence. From across the yard, laughter floated through the air, Willow's giggle followed by Elias's soft grunt of amusement. A moment later, their backlight turned off. The window went dark. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the railing. She wasn't invisible here, and maybe that scared her more than anything. The next morning, she stopped by Mabel Green's cafe to return the empty peach baskets she'd borrowed last week. Mabel gave her a long look. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep much." Thinking about the man with the hammer, June flushed. "No." Mabel raised an eyebrow. "I was thinking about fences." "Uh-huh," Mabel said, pouring hot coffee into a ceramic mug. "You know what they say around here? Probably too much. That too. But what I was going to say is, fences don't just keep people out. Sometimes they keep people in." June stirred sugar into her coffee slowly. "I didn't build the fence." "No. But you live beside it now, and you're starting to lean on it like it's yours." June sipped. "That a warning?" Mabel smiled faintly. "That's just a story waiting to happen." Later that afternoon, June found herself walking the edge of her backyard barefoot in the late fall grass. The sun was just beginning to tip low, casting long, golden shadows across the cedar boards. She stopped where the fence was still broken. Elias had fixed most of it, but left one section unfinished. Deliberately, she thought. She knelt and ran her fingers along the jagged wood. "Are you planning to finish that?" Came a voice behind her. She turned. Elias stood on his side arms, crossed expression unreadable. "I wasn't sure if I was allowed," she said softly. He studied her. "Don't need permission to stand in your own yard." "Good. Because I've been standing here a while." Neither of them moved. "I didn't mean to bother you," she added. "You didn't." A pause. "You make good preserves," he said deadpan. She blinked. "That your way of saying thank you might be." She smiled. "Then unexpectedly, you ever fix fences for hire?" He shook his head. "Nope." "Well, if you change your mind, I have 3 broken porch steps and a back door that whistles in the wind." "I'll think about it." Another pause. He nodded once, then walked off toward the woodshed. She watched him go. Watched, not stared. Because maybe for the first time in a long while, she was the one who'd been seen. The bell above the cafe door jingled like it hadn't been oiled in 50 years, which was probably true. Mabel Green liked it that way. She said it gave the place character, and Birch Hollow already had too many people trying to make things too quiet. June stepped inside and was immediately swallowed by the scent of bacon-greased cinnamon and the sharp bite of black coffee. Her glasses fogged as the warmth of the cafe clashed with the chill clinging to her flannel coat. Mabel, in her usual pink gingham apron and iron-gray braid, didn't look up from the counter as she poured a fresh pot. "You're late," she said. June blinked. "I didn't know I was expected. In Birch Hollow, the walls talk and the coffee's strong enough to make you confess." Mabel glanced up now, eyes sharp. Especially when a woman from nowhere starts handing out peach preserves and smiling at the town grump. June pulled off her coat slowly. "I didn't realize I was a headline." "Oh, honey," Mabel chuckled. "You're a season." June tried to smile, but her stomach twisted. She sat down at the bar, 2 seats from a weathered man in overalls who nodded at her like he already knew her life story. He didn't. But Birch Hollow didn't need facts to form opinions. It only needed time. Mabel poured coffee without asking. "Cream and 2 sugars, right?" June blinked. "How'd you, girl?" "I knew how you took your coffee before you did. That's how this town works." The man in overalls chuckled. "She's not lying." June sipped cautiously. It was stronger than she liked, but somehow comforting, like being slapped and hugged at the same time. "I saw you talking to Elias yesterday," Mabel said casually, flipping a pancake behind the counter. "That mean he's finally remembering how to use words again?" June raised an eyebrow. "We spoke, yes." He scowled mostly. "Did he grunt a few times?" Mabel gave a satisfied nod. "Sounds like progress." June sipped again. "You're all very invested in his grunt patterns." "Elias Blackstone is Birch Hollow's last real wild man," Mabel said. "The rest of the men are either soft drunk or both. He's got history and heartbreak. That makes him dangerous." "I'm not looking for dangerous. You think danger looks like a bar fight and a leather jacket. But sometimes it's a quiet man with too much grief and a porch full of memories." June went still. Mabel leaned forward. "You're not from here. You didn't grow up in these woods. But something brought you back. Something always does. So ask yourself, June Holloway, are you fixin' to stay or just pass through?" Before she could answer, the bell jingled again. Tomas Running Deer walked in shaking snow from his shoulders. His long black braid hung down his back like a rope, and his eyes dark and dry as old coals took everything in without blinking. He gave June a nod, then looked to Mabel. "Coffee." "You get your own," Mabel said, but she was already pouring. Tomas sat 1 stool down from June. "You're the new neighbor." She nodded slowly. "And you are old Cherokee." Former welder. Still dangerous with a blowtorch. June laughed despite herself. "Good to know." Tomas sipped, then turned his eyes on her. "You here to buy us out?" The question hit like a brick wrapped in flannel. "I what you work for Holloway Holdings. I recognize the name. Your last development took out 2 riverside mills in Georgia." Mabel turned sharply. "Tomas." "I ain't accusing," he said. "Just askin'. Folks here have a right to know if their piece is about to be bulldozed." June stiffened. "I'm not here to bulldoze anything." "Then what are you here for?" Silence stretched long enough for the pancake to burn. "I don't know yet," she said finally. Tomas didn't nod, didn't smile, just looked. Then he said quietly, "Elias lost everything except that girl and the workshop behind his house. That land was almost condemned 3 winters ago. If someone buys it up now and turns it into a parking lot, you'll lose more than just his silence. He stood and walked out without finishing his coffee. The cafe buzzed again with low conversation. June sat frozen hands curled around the mug. Mabel cleared her throat. He's direct, but he ain't mean. This town's had too many people come in with smiles and leave with our roots in their pockets. I'm not like that, June whispered. Then prove it. June left the cafe 15 minutes later, walking fast, cheeks burning. The snow was light now, more like ash falling than flakes. The air was thin and biting. She could feel eyes behind curtains watching, guessing, measuring. She passed the old blacksmith's lot, overgrown, and shuddered a for sale sign rusting in the dirt. Then she saw Elias. He was out behind his workshop, chopping firewood like it owed him money. His sleeves were rolled, breath steaming, his axe steady and unforgiving. Willow sat on a stump nearby, humming to herself and drawing in a notebook. June stood at the fence. He didn't look up. I didn't know Birch Hollow came with a lie detector in flannel, she said lightly. Still no reply. I went to the cafe this morning. I heard he said still chopping. I didn't tell anyone who I was. That won't last long. She watched him for a long moment. You always assume the worst of people. I assume they're exactly who they say they're not. He paused, then breathing hard, axe in hand. His eyes finally met hers. You didn't come here to fix fences, he said. So what did you come here to break? She swallowed. I came here to remember who I was before the world made me forget. Willow looked up. You talk real pretty for someone sad. That broke something. Elias sighed and leaned the axe against the stump. Come on, Willow. Time to wash up. The little girl waved at June, who waved back. As they disappeared into the cabin, June stood at the fence line, whined, tugging at her hair. For a moment she wanted to run, but then she looked down at the dirt near the base of the fence and saw something. A child's drawing. Her. Elias. Willow. 3 stick figures, all smiling, with the word "Friends" scrawled above them in shaky block letters. She bent down and picked it up. Her breath caught. No, she wasn't ready to run. Not yet. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the porch swing off its chain. June screamed before she could stop herself. The sky over Birch Hollow had gone black in less than 10 minutes, the kind of Appalachian storm that dropped from nowhere like a curse. Sheets of rain slapped sideways against the land, turning pine needles into slick daggers and gutters into rivers. She had been walking home from Mabel's Head, down thinking too hard, and not paying attention to the clouds creeping in. By the time she reached her yard, her coat was soaked through. She'd bolted for cover straight to Elias Blackstone's porch, and now here she was, soaked, shivering, stuck. Elias opened the screen door a few inches, a raised brow and towel in hand. You planning to get struck out here or come in before the lightning makes up its mind? She hesitated. Then she stepped inside. The porch wasn't much, just a long rectangle of old planks and hand-repaired screens filled with the scent of cedar and rust. Wind blew hard enough that the nails groaned in the beams, but the roof held. Barely. I was just passing through, she offered, brushing her wet hair out of her eyes. In a monsoon, he asked, tossing her the towel. She caught it. I didn't say I passed through wisely. Elias smirked, but only for a second. He moved to one corner of the porch, pulling an old wool blanket off the back of a chair and tossing it to her too. You always take in stray women during thunder. He shrugged. Only the ones who hand out preserves and ask too many questions. Lucky me. A long rumble rolled across the mountain ridge, deep and unhurried, like the earth itself was clearing its throat. Rain hammered the tin roof hard enough to drown a conversation, but not quite. They sat across from each other, she on the bench, he on the old crate by the post, and let the silence stretch. "I hate storms," June said finally. Elias didn't answer. He just watched her. She didn't flinch under the gaze, not anymore. The way he looked at people, direct, heavy, and quiet, used to unsettle her. Now it just felt honest. "Used to love him," she added, her voice softer. "When I was little, my grandmother would light candles and tell stories until the power came back on. I'd fall asleep on the rug with her dog curled next to me. What changed, I did." He didn't press. June pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "When you live in cities long enough, storms don't feel like stories anymore. They're sirens. Power grids failing. Flooded basements. Screaming neighbors." She shook her head. "Not rain on the roof and fireside ghost tales. Just chaos." Elias let that settle. Outside, the thunder rolled again, closer this time. Rain blew sideways into the porch, but neither of them moved. "You like living up here?" she asked. "Doesn't matter if I do," he said. "You could leave." "I could," he said, "but then I'd be somewhere else." She tilted her head. "You always answer with riddles, only when people already know the answers they're looking for." That earned a smile. They fell quiet again. The wind picked up, rattling the loose corner of a screen. "Willow's not scared of storms?" June asked. She was. Her mama made her storm jars, little mason jars filled with glitter and water and food coloring. Said every time it shook, it was just the storm dancing. "That's beautiful." She used to shake them in time with the thunder. Said it made her brave. June looked out at the gray blur beyond the porch. "Do you ever miss her?" Elias was still. Then, every morning, every night, she turned to face him, surprised by the rawness of it. "I'm sorry." "You didn't do it." "No, but I know what that kind of silence feels like." He looked at her, waiting. June hesitated. Then she said, "I was engaged once. A long time ago. He left after I gained weight. Told me I'd changed. Said I didn't try hard enough to stay the girl he fell in love with." Elias didn't flinch. He didn't look at her differently. He just said, "Sounds like he wasn't worth much to start with." She laughed softly, surprised at the warmth behind his words. "You're not like I expected. Most folks aren't." Another bolt of lightning lit the yard. For a second, everything outside the porch was silver and shadow. Then darkness again. Rain pounded harder. "Funny," she said. "People only open up when the roof is loud enough to drown out the truth." Elias looked down, rubbing his hands together absently. "Noise helps, it does." The door creaked behind them, and Willow stepped out with 2 mugs, her face sleepy and her braid messy. "Thought y'all could use cocoa," she mumbled, handing one to June and one to her dad. Elias smiled gently. "Thanks, baby." Willow curled up beside her father, her small hands clutching the mug tightly. She looked at June with that wide, unfiltered gaze again. "I'm glad you're not scared of the storm." June smiled. "I am." Willow blinked. "You don't look scared. Sometimes bravery just looks like sitting still." The little girl seemed to consider that, then nodded and leaned against her dad. As the storm began to ease and the thunder wandered off down the valley, June finished the last of her cocoa and stood. "I should get home." Elias didn't stop her. But as she reached the porch steps, he said, "If you get caught in another one, You know where to come." She turned, heart thudding harder than any thunder. "I do." She stepped down into the wet grass, boots squelching in the mud. As she reached her own porch, she looked back. Elias was still sitting there, Willow's head now on his shoulder. And for the first time since she'd moved to Birch Hollow, June felt less like a stranger. The envelope was thick. Not the kind of thick that meant junk mail or holiday cards, but the kind that said, "This changes things." Elias found it jammed halfway into the mailbox, soaked around the edges from the morning fog, his name written in clean, sharp lettering that didn't belong to any local hand. The return address was a law firm out of Asheville Holloway Holdings Legal Division. He stared at it like it was a snake waiting to strike. Willow was already halfway down the path to the creek, with her boots and backpack swinging her arms and humming. He slipped the envelope into his coat and didn't say a word. Back inside, he set it on the workbench beside his coffee cup, ignoring it like he could will it away. But it didn't budge, didn't disappear. The rain from last night had cleared, leaving the morning crisp and hollow. He opened the window to let in the scent of pine and wood smoke. Then he broke the seal. Inside were 3 documents. One of them had his workshop's address printed at the top. Another had a map with boundary lines. The third was a transfer notice. Pre-approved zoning clearance for redevelopment under Holloway Holdings Commercial Use Agreement. Signed. Processed. Effective immediately. Elias read the header 3 times before he realized what it meant. They'd bought him out, without him ever saying yes. His name wasn't even on the paperwork, just the old one, the one Clara had put down years ago when they refinanced during her treatment. She'd died before they updated it. June or her company must have found the loophole and slid right through. Elias stood still for a long time. Then, slow and precise, he folded the papers back up, slid them into his coat pocket, and walked out into the yard. The fence line came into view like a border to another world. He didn't knock. He didn't have to. June opened the door as he reached the steps, a tired smile already forming before it dropped. He didn't speak right away, just handed her the envelope. She looked confused for half a second. Then her face drained of color. "Elias, you bought my land," he said flatly. "While you were sipping cocoa on my porch and letting my daughter draw pictures of us holding hands. You let her call you friend while you filed the goddamn paperwork. It wasn't like that. It's exactly like that." June looked down at the papers as if she hadn't read them before, as if this was the first time betrayal had a return address. "I didn't approve this. I told them to wait. They didn't. I told them to put everything on hold." Elias's eyes burned with quiet fury. "You can't build trust on deeds and titles, June. That's not how this works. I know." "No, you don't. Because if you did, you'd know you just took the last piece of ground I was standing on." She stepped forward, reaching for his arm. He backed away like her touch was fire. "I'm going to fix it. How, I don't know yet." "Then don't make promises you can't cash." Her lips trembled. "I wasn't trying to take anything from you." "But you did. And not just the land." His words hung there, heavy, wet, final. He turned and walked away before she could say anything else. June stood frozen on the porch, envelope in hand, papers fluttering in the breeze. She wanted to scream, but there was no one to hear it. Back at his cabin, Elias found Willow sitting on the floor, drawing. She looked up and smiled. "Did Miss June bring more jam?" "No," he said. She tilted her head. "Is she mad?" "No." Elias said again, softer. "I think I am." Willow blinked at him wide-eyed. Then she stood up, walked over and wrapped her arms around his leg. You can be mad, she said, but don't be gone. That broke something deep and buried in him. He lifted her into his arms, holding her tighter than usual. I'm not going anywhere, baby. Good, she whispered, because I still need you. He kissed the top of her head and didn't let go for a long time. The next morning, Mabel slammed the cafe door so hard the bell rang for 5 full seconds. Tomas Running Deer looked up from his coffee. She messed up, Mabel snapped, dropping a tray of spoons on the counter. June, he asked. She filed paperwork, got Elias's workshop caught up in some corporate mess. Tomas sipped calmly. She'll fix it. You sound awful sure. She ain't the same woman who came here. I've seen her hands shake too many times for her to be cold. She's got 3 days before that legal clause kicks in, and they lock that place down. She'll fix it, Tomas repeated. And for once, Mabel didn't argue. June didn't sleep. She stayed up all night drafting emails, calling numbers, begging for someone at the Holloway Holdings legal department to explain why they pushed the papers through. Every answer came back the same, it's done. She tried calling Marcus, straight to voicemail. She stared at the contract she had shoved in her drawer days ago, hands shaking. She'd come here to disappear, but she'd ended up rooting herself in someone else's pain. And now she had no idea how to make it right. The doorbell rang around noon. She opened it to find Willow on her porch, holding something in both hands, a picture. 3 stick figures again, this time with sad faces. The middle one was crying. I made this for you, she said, so you don't forget us. June's voice cracked. I could never forget you. Willow stared up at her. Fix the fence. And just like that, the girl turned and walked back across the yard. June looked down at the drawing. It was torn at the top, taped back together. Mended. Not perfect, but trying. She nodded to herself. She had 72 hours to undo the damage, and she was going to use every second. The first thing June did was put on boots that could take a beating. The second was drive down the mountain to the county clerk's office and wait outside the door before they even flipped the open sign. She paced the gravel with a legal pad in one hand and a to-go coffee in the other, the nerves twisting her stomach so hard she couldn't finish the drink. At 8:01, the door opened and she stepped inside with a plan. By 9:30, it was in pieces. She slammed the file closed and rubbed her forehead, leaning over the counter, while the clerk, a kind-eyed man in his 70s, sorted through old records. Ma'am, he said gently, the deed hasn't had Elias Blackstone's name on it since 2018. His wife's name remained primary after her passing. The transfer filed last week was, unfortunately, legal. June didn't look up. But wrong. He hesitated. Legality and rightness don't always shake hands. I need to contest it. You can, but with a corporate acquisition that size, you'll need time, lawyers, and someone who can prove damages. She sighed. I don't have time. I have 2 days before they lock him out of his own workshop. The clerk gave her a sympathetic look. Then you'll have to go the long way around. What's the long way? Convince the people who signed it to unsign it. She left the courthouse with a headache blooming behind her eyes. By the time she pulled back into Birch Hollow, the fog had burned off and the sun was warm on the back of her neck. But it didn't help. The guilt stuck to her skin worse than sweat. She parked beside the cafe and stepped inside, ready to face the music. The bell jingled. Silence greeted her. Mabel was at the register. Tomas sat at the corner table with his coffee, same as always. But the atmosphere had shifted. No friendly nods. No casual smiles. Just watchful eyes. June walked up to the counter. "I know," she said, "and I'm here to fix it." Mabel leaned forward. "You can't fix a betrayal with a promise and good intentions, sugar." "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," June replied, voice steady. "I'm here to earn it." That made Tomas lift his eyes. Mabel studied her. "If you want forgiveness in Birch Hollow, you don't ask for it. You earn it." "I'm trying." "Then get to work." That's exactly what she did. First, she drove to the edge of town to the Holloway Holdings trailer, where 2 surveyors and a junior manager were preparing to map out construction boundaries. She walked in without knocking and demanded a halt to operations. They laughed. Then she showed them her title, Vice President of Development. Then they shut up. "I want a 2-week freeze," she said. "No markings, no removals, no equipment deliveries. I'll sign it myself if I have to." The junior manager, a wiry man named Curtis, scratched his neck. "With all due respect, Ms. Holloway, we were told you'd been pulled from this project. Legal owns it now. I pulled me from the project. Now I'm back." Curtis blinked. "You have the authority." She locked eyes with him. "You want to bet your job on that?" He swallowed. "I'll call it in." "Do that. And while you're at it, tell Marcus I want a call back by tonight, or I'll come to the Atlanta office personally." Outside, she leaned against her car and exhaled. That was only step 1. Step 2 took her back to the fence. Elias wasn't outside. She stood at the broken section and waited. After 10 minutes, she heard the workshop door creak open. He didn't say a word as he approached. Didn't even look at her. She turned. "I'm freezing the project." He still didn't meet her eyes. "Corporate's going to push back," she continued. "But I'm pulling every favor I have left. I started this, and I'm going to stop it. Nothing. I talked to the clerk," she said, "and I know I can't fix the deed. But if I can get your workshop designated as historical, it can't be touched. They won't be able to tear it down without community approval." Still silence. She stepped closer, desperate now. "You were right," she said. "I didn't come here to fix fences. I came to hide. But somewhere along the way, I started to care. About Willow, about this town, about you." That made him flinch. She pressed on. "I'm not asking for trust, just a second chance." He looked up at last. "Second chances mean something in places like this, but only if you bleed for 'em." She nodded. "I'm bleeding." He stared at her for a long moment, then finally said, "You know the cafe's been there since 1910. She blinked. "Want to start your history pitch with the cafe? Mabel's got photos, records. That place is sacred." He turned and walked back to his workshop, but this time he didn't shut the door. The rest of the day was a blur of scanning filing and handwritten letters. June sat at the cafe that evening with Mabel and Tomas sorting through archives. "I didn't realize this town had so many stories," June murmured, flipping through a photo album. Mabel smiled faintly. "That's 'cause people like you usually come for the dirt, not the roots. I'm staying for both." Tomas sipped his coffee. "Then dig deep, and don't flinch." That night, June returned home with her arms full of files and her heart a little steadier. She didn't turn on the TV. She didn't check her phone. She sat by the window with the drawing Willow had given her and stared at the stars until the sky turned black. She'd lost a lot in her life. But this time she wasn't going to lose because she didn't fight. At dawn, Willow knocked on her door. She stood on the porch holding a paper bag and a small hammer. June opened the door in surprise. "Daddy said you'll need help hanging up the pictures," the little girl said shyly. For the history thing. June smiled, tears prickling behind her eyes. "Come in," she said. "We've got work to do." June hadn't worn a blazer in weeks. Now, standing in front of her cabin mirror, she could barely recognize herself with it on. The navy fabric still fit, sort of. Tighter in the shoulders, stiffer in the sleeves, like her body had settled into a life less polished. Or maybe it was her soul that didn't fit the mold anymore. The knock on the door came exactly at 8 sharp and clipped like a punctuation mark. She opened it to find Marcus Caldwell standing on her porch in a tailored suit and $1,000 shoes, holding a paper cup of espresso and the air of a man already disappointed. "You look cozy," he said, glancing at her jeans under the blazer. "Mountain formal." June replied, stepping aside. He walked in like he owned the place. His eyes scanned the room, firewood stacked near the hearth, blueprints on the table, a plate of cinnamon muffins that Willow had dropped off an hour earlier. "This wasn't what we discussed," Marcus said. "You were supposed to close Birch Hollow quietly. No headlines, no sentiment. Clean. I changed the plan." "You don't get to change the plan. You pitched this project. You got board approval. Now you're freezing it on emotion." "I'm freezing it because it's wrong." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You think these people are going to thank you for tanking your career?" "I'm not doing it for thanks. No, you're doing it for a man with a beard and a tragic backstory." "Don't," she snapped. "June, you disappeared after Atlanta fell apart. We covered for you. We gave you this assignment because no one wanted it. And you were fine with that until you decided to play local savior." June stepped toward him, her voice low. "Have you ever lost something that mattered more than your name on a plaque?" He blinked, caught off guard by the edge in her voice. "I have," she continued. "And I'm not going to let this place get eaten up just so our stock price looks better in Q3. Marcus's jaw tightened. "They'll pull you off the board." "I don't care. Don't lie to me. You've wanted that seat your entire life." June looked around the cabin, the mismatched chairs, the firewood Willow helped stack the half-finished scrapbook on the table of Birch Hollow's forgotten stories. Then she said the words that scared her more than any demotion ever could. "Maybe that life doesn't fit anymore." Marcus stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "You're going to throw it all away?" he asked. She took a breath, steady and sure. "Sometimes saving a place means letting go of the person you were when you found it." He shook his head and walked toward the door. "I'll give you 48 hours. After that, I go over your head." She didn't answer. He left without saying goodbye. Later that morning, June stood beside the cafe window, arms crossed, as she watched Mabel pin up a photo on the town board, an old black and white of the original blacksmith shop, charred edges from a fire decades ago, but still legible. "We've almost got enough," Mabel said. "If we get the signatures from the Historical Commission, that workshop's untouchable. I'm meeting with the rep tomorrow. Just need one more testimonial from a longtime resident to hit the threshold. Tomas'll do it." June looked at her. "You sure he's crusty, not heartless?" They both smiled. Across the street, Elias stood on a ladder fixing one of the porch awnings of the general store. He didn't look over, but she knew he saw her. That was the new rhythm between them. Not silence, but space. And space, June was learning, could grow things, or ruin them. That afternoon, she visited Tomas Runningdeer's home, an old log cabin half swallowed by ivy and mountain laurel. He answered the door with a soldering iron in one hand and a pipe in the other. "I need your help," she said. "I figured," he muttered, stepping aside. Inside, his walls were covered in artifacts, hand-carved tools, black and white photographs, feathers hung with care. He sat at a work table where he'd been repairing a cracked leather belt. "I need one more testimonial," June said. "Your name carries weight. You've been here the longest. And you think that earns me trust, oh," she admitted. "But it earns you truth." Tomas looked at her for a long time. Then he stood, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a framed photo. It was a younger Elias Clara beside him, holding a baby barely old enough to sit up. "They gave me this after the fire," he said. "Clara used to bring Willow over on Fridays while Elias worked late. I taught her how to fold paper cranes." He looked up. "You think that's just zoning and permits?" June swallowed hard. "No. You gonna stay? I want to." "That's not what I asked." She hesitated. "I'm trying to build something real," she said. "I don't know what it looks like yet, but I know it doesn't involve erasing people's roots." Tomas grunted, then turned back to his workbench. "Fine. I'll sign your paper." June exhaled. "But don't come back next year as someone else." "I won't." "You better not." That night she took the folder of signatures and documents and walked up to Elias's porch. He was there sharpening a tool under the porch light. "I got it," she said. He didn't turn. "I got the signatures, the stories, the historical zoning proposal. I'm submitting it first thing in the morning." Still nothing. "I didn't come here expecting anything. But I'm hoping." Now he looked up. She swallowed. "I'm hoping there's still something left between us that's worth saving." He set the tool down. "You didn't just fight for the land," he said. "You fought for the people." She nodded. "Even me." Another nod. Elias stood and stepped toward her. The porch light cast shadows across his face, but his eyes were soft now. "I'm not good at saying thank you. You don't have to, but I'm saying it anyway." Then he did something unexpected. He took her hand, held it, said nothing, but everything. The first morning after the filing was quiet, too quiet. June stood on her porch, coffee going cold in her hands, as the town slowly started to move around her. No texts, no angry calls, no bulldozers, just the scent of wet pine and the sound of crows gossiping in the trees. Elias hadn't said much the night before, but he didn't pull away when she took his hand. That was more than she'd hoped for. She should have felt relief, but instead, she felt the weight of calm before something broke. In Birch Hollow, it's not the storm that tests you, it's what you do when the sky clears. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, urgent. Need to speak. Now." June exhaled through her nose and texted back, "Talk." Seconds later, her screen lit up with his name. "No pleasantries," Marcus said. "Your little stunt with the Historical Commission made headlines, and now our board is nervous." "Good." "No. Not good. We got an offer. A counterbuy. A private investor wants to acquire Birch Hollow at triple what we paid." June's spine went rigid. "You're selling the entire project." "They want the land, the workshop, the trails, even the old mine. Everything. You gave them a PR headache, and now we're turning it into profit. You can't do that. We are doing that. And here's the kicker: if the deal closes, they'll bypass the local zoning restrictions. They've got friends in state planning. That petition you worked so hard on won't mean squat." June's hand tightened around her mug until the handle snapped off. "I'm going to fight this." "You can try," Marcus said. "But you're out of moves." He hung up. She stared at the call log, heart pounding, then launched her phone across the porch. It clattered against the steps and skidded into the grass. Battery case popping off like it was insulted. She was out of moves. But Birch Hollow wasn't. She drove straight to the general store where Mabel and Tomas were already sitting on the bench out front, shelling peas into an old metal bowl, like it was still 1950. "You heard?" June asked. Mabel nodded. "Marcus called me, asked if I'd be interested in relocating my business to a more accessible frontage. I told him he could relocate his foot where the sun don't shine." Tomas chuckled. "We're not done," June said. "But we'll need everyone. The whole town." "You want a fight?" Mabel said. "You'll get one." By noon, she'd gathered nearly 20 people at the cafe, council members, landowners, longtime residents. Even Hank, the retired mechanic who never spoke unless whiskey was involved. They sat around the tables like it was war council. "Here's the deal," June said. "If they sell to this private buyer, everything goes. They'll build condos, resorts, a private access road. Everything this place is gets erased." "What can we do?" someone asked. "Go public. Go loud. Social media, news outlets, historical societies. We show them that Birch Hollow isn't just a tract of land, it's a legacy." "What about legal options?" Mabel asked. "I'm already talking to a non-profit firm out of Asheville. They specialize in rural preservation. But we have to hold them off long enough for pressure to mount." Voices rose. Plans formed. June scribbled timelines and assigned tasks. The room buzzed with a kind of nervous fire. They weren't just saving a town. They were saving themselves. That evening, she walked to Elias's workshop. He was welding again, sparks flying, sleeves rolled, face smeared with sweat and soot. Willow was nearby, sitting cross-legged with headphones, scribbling in a spiral notebook. June waited until the sparks died down and the torch hissed out. "They're trying to sell the town," she said. "I know." "You what?" He wiped his hands on a rag. "Marcus came by earlier, thought he could buy me out personally." June's jaw clenched. "What did you say?" "I said I'd rather burn the place down." A pause. Then a smirk. Figured that'd make his suit wrinkle. She laughed despite the ache in her chest. "I'm gathering people," she said. "We're fighting, but it won't be easy. Nothing worth keeping ever is." June glanced at Willow, who was now humming softly to herself. "She okay?" she asked. "She senses things," Elias said. "Knows when something's off." "I didn't mean for any of this to fall on her." Elias looked at her. "She likes you." "You know," June swallowed. "I like her too, and me." He said it softly, almost like a joke. June met his eyes. "I don't know what this is, but I know I'm not walking away from it." Elias nodded once, like that was enough. The next morning, the first article dropped, "The Town That Corporate Forgot." Then a tweet went viral with a picture of Willow holding a cardboard sign that read, "Please don't tear down my dad's workshop." June hadn't even seen the photo get taken. By nightfall, national journalists were calling. The nonprofit legal team had agreed to a preliminary injunction. The clock was still ticking, but now Birch Hollow had teeth. People came out in droves, telling stories, waving signs, bringing food to volunteers. Photos of the blacksmith shop, the old schoolhouse, the hand-dug well behind Mabel's were everywhere. They weren't saving nostalgia. They were defending identity. And June, for the first time in her life, felt like more than just someone managing a crisis. She was part of something ancient, something rooted. But as the sky cleared and the fire grew hotter, so did the pushback. The buyer Stratus Land Group sent a cease and desist. They offered Elias a final buyout, $500,000. He turned it down. "They think I'm made of numbers," he told June. "But I'm made of sawdust and sweat. And those don't fit on a spreadsheet." That night, she stayed on his porch long after Willow went to bed. "You ever think we'll win?" she asked. Elias leaned back in the swing beside her. Doesn't matter, she looked over. We fight anyway. Marcus's second visit wasn't unannounced. It came in the form of a letter, hand-delivered, signed by 4 board members, neatly printed with enough polite language to burn. June sat on the porch swing, letter in hand, reading it for the 3rd time. The lines didn't change. The threat didn't soften. It was simple corporate cold. Terminate your opposition to the sale or forfeit your stake in Holloway Holdings and all associated voting rights. She let the paper drift onto the table like it had started to burn her. She hadn't told Elias yet. Wasn't sure she could. Inside, the sound of Willow's laughter floated through the screen. She was playing some guessing game with Elias about clouds and animals. June listened for a second, then stood. She needed air that wasn't wrapped in consequences. The woods behind Birch Hollow were cool and silent this time of day. The kind of silence that made your thoughts louder. She hiked up to an old overlook she'd found weeks ago, the kind with a flat boulder and enough sky to make your heart ache. When she sat down, she didn't cry. She wanted to, but crying felt like a luxury she hadn't earned yet. Instead, she pulled out her notebook and made 2 lists. Option A, stay, lose the company, burn every bridge. Option B, step aside, keep the career, lose the town. Elias, Willow herself. Halfway down the page, her pen stopped moving. She remembered her mother's voice, soft, worn, full of cigarette smoke and defeat. June, baby, you don't get to live 2 lives. Pick one and hold it tight. She hadn't understood it at the time. She did now, because this life, the one with dirt on her boots and blackberry jam on her porch, and a man who held silence like scripture, was real. And the other one, suits, cold lights, conference rooms full of smiles with knives behind them. She folded the notebook. Decision made. But decisions cost. And this one would take everything. Elias knew something was wrong the minute he saw her walking back down the trail. Not just the slump in her shoulders, but the way she held her breath like words were stacked too high inside her. He met her at the fence line, wiping grease from his hands. You look like someone just buried your favorite dog. June tried to smile. Failed. I have to give up the company. That stopped him. For real, she nodded. If I don't, they'll sell the town to Stratus. Everything we've built, the petition, the signatures, the media pressure, it won't matter. They'll fast-track demolition within the month. Elias looked out over the trees like he was counting how many he'd have to cut down to make it hurt less. You sure about this? No, she admitted. But I'm sure I couldn't live with myself if I didn't fight. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, some things you fight for, some things you protect, and some things you give up so they can grow. I'm starting to think you missed your calling as a poet, she said, smiling through the ache. He touched her hand. I gave up the city once, my welding shop, contracts with people who flew in on helicopters. Clara didn't want that life, so I let it go. Did you ever regret it? Every now and then, he said. But not when I'm here. Not when I see Willow growing up with her feet in the river instead of staring at billboards. He leaned closer. If this is your moment, June, don't blink. She nodded. Then she stepped into his arms and stayed there until the sun dipped low behind the ridge. The next morning, she dressed in that same blazer, but this time without shame. She drove to Asheville, walked into the Holloway Holdings office, past the receptionist, the stairs, the awkward silences. Marcus met her outside the boardroom, arms folded, mouth tight. They're waiting, he said. I'm ready. The room was cold. Long table. 12 people, none of them smiling. She stood at the end. No slideshow, no charts, just truth. I'm stepping down as Vice President of Development effective immediately, she said. I'm signing over my equity and renouncing all voting rights. Murmurs, whispers. Marcus looked down, not surprised, just sad in a way he didn't know how to show. But before I go, June added, I want you to understand something. Birch Hollow isn't just trees and land. It's not a portfolio. It's history, people. It's a mirror for who we say we are. She met every eye around the table. And if this company signs off on its destruction, you're not just killing a town. You're proving that the only thing that matters to you is control. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else looked away. Marcus stood. That's enough. No, June said. It's not. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. In here are testimonials from over 100 residents, historical documentation, and a community-led preservation agreement. It's filed, public, and supported by multiple state representatives. If you try to override it, it will go to court. She placed it on the table, then turned and walked out. Her steps were slow, but they were free. 2 days later, Birch Hollow woke up to news. Stratus land deal terminated. Board split. Holding pattern in effect. The fight wasn't over, but the front line had held. At sunrise, June sat on the porch with Elias and Willow, all three of them watching mist curl across the field like the mountain was exhaling. You did it, Elias said. We did it, she corrected. Willow leaned her head on June's arm. What now, the girl asked. June thought for a long time. Then she said, we start over. For real this time. Rain had a way of telling the truth in Birch Hollow. It didn't shout or slam like the southern thunderstorms from the lowlands, it whispered. Slow, persistent. It softened hard ground, forced you to stay put, and made every sound clearer. Even silence. June stood under the eave of Elias's workshop, watching the drizzle bead off the tin roof and soak the dirt path like the land itself had been holding its breath. A week ago, the town had almost been lost. Now it breathed again, quiet and muddy. Inside the forge glowed with orange breath flickering as Elias hammered out a bracket for the schoolhouse sign. His sleeves were rolled, his focus steady. The way he moved now was different, less burdened, like something inside had shifted or been lifted. She knew it wasn't just the fight being over. It was the return. The workshop, the town, the land, none of it had let go of him. Not really. It had just been waiting for him to come home. By midday, Birch Hollow's council was crammed into the general store, and steam from a dozen mugs fogged up the windows. We're doing this, Abibel said, setting down a tin box of handwritten pledges. A land trust owned by us, protected by law. Tomas pointed at the map on the wall. We'll start with anchor parcels. My old orchard. Mabel's Cafe. The town square. What about the workshop, someone asked. All eyes turned to June. She met their gaze. Elias is in. We filed the papers this morning. A murmur spread. Half awe, half relief. I got an email from the state grant office, June continued. They're pushing us into priority status. With the Stratus deal canceled, we've got attention. We use it. She passed around folders, drafted charters, land survey proposals, volunteer rosters. One by one, people nodded. Signed. Offered help. It wasn't just policy anymore. It was belonging. As the meeting wrapped, June gathered the documents, glancing out the fogged-up window. The rain was still falling, but now it looked different. Now it looked like growth. Back at the cabin, a sealed envelope sat on the porch swing, cream-colored, thick, formal, in a way that didn't belong in the woods. It had only her name written on the front in ink that reminded her of pressed violets and old recipes. Inside was a letter. You don't know me, but I knew Clara. She was family to me once. I'd like to speak with you. And with Elias. I'm in town through Sunday. R. There was no phone number, only the name of a nearby bed and breakfast etched neatly at the bottom. June folded the letter slowly, careful not to smudge it. Her thumb lingered on the name, R. Ray. She remembered the name from the funeral records. Clara's cousin, the one who lived up in Tennessee and worked as a folklorist or something close to it. Elias had never mentioned her. Maybe it had been too painful. Or maybe he hadn't wanted to reopen doors he wasn't sure he could walk through. She carried the letter to the workshop. Elias read it standing near the forge, not speaking until the last word had sunk in. Ray, he said. She and Clara were close, spent summers together up north. Clara said Ray always wrote poems in the dirt. June watched his face carefully. Do you want to see her? Elias stared at the fire a long moment, then nodded. Yeah, I think I do. That evening, as rain eased into mist, Elias drove alone to the edge of town. The bed and breakfast sat under a row of swaying maples lit by a porch lamp and the scent of wet wood. Ray was waiting in the front parlor. She hadn't changed much, still wore scarves like armor, still had the kind of eyes that seemed to see past the surface. They didn't hug, just sat quiet across a wide oak table. She loved you, Ray said first. I know. She wrote me letters every season, even after the diagnosis. Said you were the only thing that made sense in a world that didn't anymore. Elias swallowed. She made this life real for me. Ray pulled out a small leather journal, frayed and soft from use. She left this with me. Said it wasn't time yet. Said you'd know when. He opened it slowly. Inside were pages of sketches, thoughts, pieces of dreams, a list of future projects, a note about Willow learning to tie her shoes, and one sentence circled in blue ink: the land isn't what we fight for, it's what roots us. It's not where you lose her. It's where she stayed. Elias blinked hard, closed the journal, pressed his hand against it like a prayer. She wanted you to keep going, Ray said, and maybe, just maybe, to let someone else in. He nodded. It was all she needed to say. The next morning, Birch Hollow buzzed with movement. Willow helped paint the schoolhouse shutters with Tomas. Mabel baked 24 extra pies for the Land Trust event. June sat on a picnic table organizing grant folders while rain dried from the grass. It was a celebration, but it didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like planting season. As people gathered in the square, music floated from someone's porch radio. Kids chased each other barefoot. Elders told stories. June stood back for a moment and took it all in. This wasn't the town she'd arrived in. It was something better. Elias appeared at her side, a calm presence in the motion. She gave me her journal, he said quietly. June glanced up. What was in it? Everything and nothing. Just her. Her heart. He looked down at her. She left me instructions. June raised an eyebrow. He smiled. Not the bossy kind. The gentle kind. She touched his arm. What are you going to do? Build the bench, she sketched. Behind the cabin, facing the ridge. I'll help. I hoped you'd say that. Across the square, Willow was showing someone a handful of wildflowers. She moved like a child who no longer worried about being uprooted. June let herself believe, maybe for the first time, that they could stay. That staying didn't mean stagnating. That roots didn't mean walls. She turned to Elias, her voice soft but steady. The land remembers who loves it, and it loves back with roots, with rain, with return. He nodded once. I'm ready to remember too. The garden behind the old schoolhouse was supposed to be small, just a handful of raised beds, a shaded reading nook, maybe a bench or two. But like everything in Birch Hollow lately, it had grown bigger than the blueprint. Volunteers kept showing up. Retired teachers brought books and ideas for outdoor classrooms. Kids painted rocks with wild colors and lined them around the pathways. Even Hank, who hadn't smiled in 15 years, donated a stack of old tools and then stayed to help June dig post holes. It was more than a project now. It was proof that they were still here, that Birch Hollow could be something owned by its people, not bought by outsiders. That healing didn't just happen in silence or grief, it happened in sweat, in conversation, in the collective press of calloused hands against sun-warmed earth. June wiped her brow with the back of her hand and looked across the lot. Elias was helping Tomas lower a cedar post into a cement footing. Willow sat on a tree stump nearby, painting signs for the garden beds in big, bold letters: beans, lettuce, wildflowers. A breeze kicked up dust. The smell of soil and sawdust wrapped around her like a second skin. She hadn't felt this grounded since her father died. A sound buzzed in her back pocket. Her phone. She pulled it out, thumbed across the screen, and paused at the name. Rebecca Liu, Appalachian Resilience Project. She stared at it for a moment, heart quickening. June, Rebecca said when she answered, voice warm and businesslike. Hope I'm catching you at a good time. That depends, June said, glancing back toward the garden. We've got a proposal. Something new, big. June stepped away from the noise and sat on the edge of the wooden platform they'd started framing for the tool shed. We're finalizing our pilot program. 3 anchor sites in the region. One of them could be Birch Hollow. June blinked. You're serious. I'm always serious. We want a local team to co-lead the initiative. Your name came up more than once. So did Elias's. June laughed in disbelief. Elias doesn't even check his email. Exactly. He builds things that matter. So do you. And this work, we need that. Rebecca went on explaining the framework: community-based land trust partnerships, education modules, skill sharing between sites. Birch Hollow would be the base, but there would be travel, oversight, pressure. It's a 2-year commitment, Rebecca said. With funding. You'd be setting the tone for future towns. June closed her eyes. It was everything she'd worked toward, just not in the way she imagined. I'll need time, she said. You've got 3 days. Then we move forward with someone else. The call ended, and the silence left behind was heavy. That night, June sat on the cabin porch, while fireflies blinked like memories in the grass. Elias joined her with 2 cups of tea, one hand wrapped around his wrist, like it ached from the day's labor. She told him everything. When she finished, she braced herself, but he didn't flinch. She mentioned me too, he asked. She wants us to co-lead. Sounds like a lot of noise. It is. He sipped his tea. Would we be gone sometimes? But Birch Hollow stays the base. That's non-negotiable. He didn't answer right away. The air between them filled with the hum of cicadas and the creak of the old porch swing under their weight. I just started breathing again, he said finally. The forge is steady. Willow sleeps through the night. I'm not looking to blow that up. I'm not either. But June looked at her hands. But what if this is what blooming looks like? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next day, he built alone. June watched from a distance as he hammered a frame together for the new shed, then walked it across the lot like it weighed nothing. He was strong in the way trees were quiet, rooted slow to move but impossible to ignore. That evening, he placed a folder on her workbench. I read it, he said. You think we should do it? I think I don't want to wake up 10 years from now and regret not trying. She blinked. That's a yes, it's a maybe. But it's closer to yes than no. They stood in the quiet, letting that settle. Then he added, You can't rebuild a life without breaking ground. And sometimes, breaking means blooming. June smiled through the lump in her throat. You should write that down. I just did, he said, tapping his temple. They called Rebecca that Sunday from the schoolhouse kitchen. Mabel was baking pies in the next room, and the smell of peaches made the moment feel sweeter than it should have. We're in June, said. But we have conditions, Elias added. Of course you do, Rebecca replied. Birch Hollow stays center. We're not moving. We're not reshaping it to fit a grant or chasing PR. If you want us, you get this version of us. Rebecca laughed. Deal. Willow burst into the room at that moment holding a laminated map of the garden she'd drawn in crayon. June smiled down at her, feeling something shift. This wasn't about leaving. It was about reaching. And reaching, if done right, didn't mean letting go. In the days that followed, everything sped up. News crews came through. Rebecca visited and walked the land herself. Interviews were given, pictures taken. But none of it changed the rhythm of the town. Mornings still started with coffee and creek fog. Evenings still smelled like firewood and rain-wet pine. The garden took shape bed by bed. A truckload of compost arrived. Volunteers built benches out of reclaimed oak. The kids painted a mural on the side of the schoolhouse, a mountain, a forge, a river, and a little girl planting a seed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real, June had learned, was better than perfect any day. Elias kept his forge humming, but started mentoring again. 2 local teens came twice a week now. Willow began writing letters to the other project sites, calling herself the official garden keeper of Birch Hollow. June found herself smiling more than she used to, and thinking less about what she had lost, more about what she was growing. The final nail went into the tool shed on a Sunday morning. June stood back and looked at the whole garden, the way the path curled around the cedar tree, how the sun caught the painted signs and made them glow. They had built something that breathed, and it had taken breaking ground to do it. The morning of the Bloom Festival arrived quiet, not silent. Birch Hollow was never truly silent, but quiet in a way that felt like reverence, like the land itself had paused to watch. Mist hovered low over the creek. The air was thick with the smell of lilac and wood smoke. In every corner of the town, someone was sweeping a porch, hanging a lantern, arranging chairs. Even the birds seemed to sing softer, like they knew the day wasn't meant to be rushed. June stood on the back steps of the schoolhouse, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the garden. The wildflowers had bloomed just in time. Purples, oranges, golds, they spilled over the edge of the beds like laughter. Behind her, she heard soft footsteps. Elias. You up early, he said, rubbing sleep from his eyes with one hand and holding a folded flannel in the other. Didn't sleep much, she admitted. Nervous. Not nervous, she said. Just full. He stepped beside her, took in the view. You did good, he said. We did good. He smiled. That quiet, slow smile of his, the one that always felt like a secret just for her. Willow's up, he said after a beat. Wrote a speech. Won't let me read it. June laughed. She's more stubborn than both of us. She's more sure than both of us. They stood like that for a while, shoulder to shoulder, letting the moment settle. The past months had been a storm, a war, a reckoning. But somehow, through all of it, they'd found something better than victory. They'd found peace. By mid-morning, the town square was alive. Booths lined the street, local produce preserves crafts. The air buzzed with fiddle music, laughter, and the gentle murmur of neighbors reunited. Kids ran barefoot through chalk drawings. Someone had turned the old sheriff's car into a flower bed. At the center of it all, the garden stood open. Not just as a plot of land, but as a symbol of resistance, of belonging, of what could grow when you stopped asking permission and started planting anyway. The ceremony was simple. No pomp, no stage, just a circle of people. Elias stood beside June Willow, between them, clutching a sheet of paper. Mabel called for attention, raising a hand. Before we cut this ribbon, she said, we've got a few words from our youngest project lead. Willow stepped forward, small but steady. She cleared her throat, looked out at the crowd, and began. This garden was built by hands, by shovels and sweat. But it was also built by hearts, by people who said no to selling and yes to staying. It's not just vegetables or flowers. It's us. It's what happens when we decide we're enough. She paused. My mom left for a long time. My dad was sad for a long time. But now we're all here. And I think this town is like a big family now. So thank you for not giving up. A hush. Then applause that felt like thunder. June wrapped her arms around Willow, whispering, You crushed it, kid. Elias nodded, visibly choked up. Then came the ribbon. A long stretch of burlap, dyed with wild berry juice, tied across two old porch posts. Willow held the scissors. June guided her hand. One snip. And just like that, Birch Hollow's future began. The rest of the day unfolded like a memory you wanted to keep in your pocket. Elias gave forge demos to a crowd of kids who marveled at the sparks. Tomas sang an old folk tune with a banjo that hadn't been tuned in a decade. June spent the afternoon walking the garden, hearing story after story of what the town had been and what people hoped it could be now. She was mid-conversation with a retired miner named Clarence when someone tapped her shoulder. It was Rebecca. You clean up well, she said, smiling at June. So do you, June replied. Rebecca handed her a clipboard. Final signatures for the pilot agreement. June flipped through the pages, scanning the last lines. Still feel like the right call, Rebecca asked. June glanced around at the people, the land, the sheer pulse of life around her. Yes, she said, but not because of what we'll build next. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Then why? Because of what we already built, and who we built it with. Later that evening, as the sun melted into a soft gold behind the ridge, June found Elias back at the cabin, seated on the new bench they'd built together. He looked up as she approached. Hey, he said. Hey. She sat beside him. The bench faced the hills, wild, rolling, endless. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Elias broke the silence. I think I figured it out. Why Clara wanted me to build the bench here. June leaned back, waiting. She didn't want me to keep staring at where she's buried. She wanted me to look past it, to see what's still growing. June smiled, eyes stinging. That sounds like her. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small carving knife. She wrote something in her journal. I think it should go on the bench. He pointed to the underside of the seat, where he'd etched the words carefully into the grain. No one remembers the blueprints. They remember the hands that built it, the hearts that stayed, and the love that turned wood into home. June touched the carving, her fingers trembling. It's perfect, she whispered. He looked at her, then eyes full of both the past and everything that might still come. I never thought I'd build anything like this again, he said. You didn't build it alone. They sat there until the stars came out, one by one. Willow joined them, eventually curling up between them with a blanket and a content sigh. June wrapped an arm around her, then reached for Elias's hand. He took it without hesitation. The land around them was quiet, but not empty. It pulsed, with memory, with meaning, with roots. And in that quiet, the story found its close, not with a final word, but with something better, a place, a home, a future you didn't have to chase, one you could grow with and stay forever.